Hi, my name is Barbara Dubach, and I'm going to introduce you to session 1 of the Global Resource Revolution Trainer, which will focus on global challenges. Our world is facing a global resource challenge. It has become evident over the past 15 years, a period of financial crisis, food crisis, energy and water crisis events. Since the turn of the century, the gradual decline of resource commodity prices has been reversed by a steep increase, which you will see on the graph on the next slide. The increase in resource commodity prices has an impact on production costs. For example, in Germany, material inputs take some 40% of total production costs in the processing industry. At the same time, the International Resource Panel reports an increasing use of resources at global scale. During the 20th century, the annual extraction of ores and metals multiplied by 27, construction materials by 34, fossil fuels by 12, and total material extraction is increased by 8 times. So let's have a look at the commodity price index. It illustrates how spikes in resource prices have been accompanied by dramatic events such as the First and the Second World War, as well as the 1970s oil crisis. For some, this signals key risks that communities and industries face worldwide, and they expect a global economic and environmental crisis, while others see it as an opportunity. For example, the authors of The Resource Revolution, Stefan Heck of the Stanford University and Matt Rogers of McKinsey Company, have argued that the combination of information technology, nanotechnology, and biotech with traditional industrial technology can unleash a step change in resource productivity and generate new profit pools. The resource revolution, together with the fourth industrial revolution, have the potential to raise global income levels and improve the quality of life for populations around the world, while decoupling grows from the resource constraints. The commodity price evolution reminds of cycles of growth and transition as highlighted by the so-called Kondratiev cycles, which you will see in slide 5. Economists have noted that economic growth tends to come in long waves of prosperity, each driven by the spread of new technologies and structural economic change. Economist Nikolai Kondratiev described this in his book in 1925 already as the major economic cycles. Declines in growth are periods where old economic structures exhaust their growth potential. Downturn in global economic growth, as felt more recently along the financial crisis from 2007 to 2009, can be followed by a new Kondratiev, centered around, for example, new nano and biotechnologies, as suggested by Allianz Global Investors. Now let's turn to you. If you had to indicate what are the drivers behind global resource use, what would be your response? Is it the result of population, of human migration, modernization, growing income levels, or simply human greed, or a combination of these factors together? The reports of the International Resource Panel signal 2 dominant drivers of change in global resource use. They are population and income. In addition, an additional driver is the one of urbanization. We will now have a look at these drivers in more detail. The Decoupling 1 report of the International Resource Panel noted a very inelastic relationship between resource use and population numbers. Consider that the world population increased from 1.65 billion to over 6 billion during the 20th century. By 2011, our global population exceeded 7 billion, and it is expected to pass 10 billion people before the end of the 21st century. As mentioned before, another driver of change is increasing income. With more income, the volume of resources that each citizen consumes increases. Of course, per capita incomes have been growing unequally worldwide, with large disparities between countries, but also within countries. As an example, one person in India uses an average of 4 tons of resources per year, compared to an average of 25 tons used by a Canadian annually. It has been estimated that within the next 20 years, there will be an additional of 3 billion people worldwide enjoying middle-class income levels. Together with the 1.8 billion middle-class income today, it can be expected that these 4.8 billion middle-class population will aspire to reach better standards of living, which will go hand in hand with ever greater resource use. This brings us back to global averages. The overall result of growth globally leads to averages that signal warnings related to the direction the global economy is heading. So if we look at the figure in slide 9 of the book Resource Revolution, it indicates annual per capita resource consumption in the USA, which is 10 times higher than the average per inhabitant globally. It is interesting to note how much of resource consumption in areas such as non-renewable fuel use, metal use, and infrastructure use is indirect. This is indicated in the slide with the dark black shades. Future trends in resource demand will be heavily influenced by growth in emerging markets. The pace of increase in resource demand will be amplified by fast increasing incomes in populous lower income nations. If emerging market populations adopt similar technologies and lifestyles to those found today in OECD countries, for example, global metal needs will be 3 to 9 times larger than all metals currently used in the world. Demand for food, feed, and fiber could increase by 70% by 2050. If all citizens globally reach the level of resource use of the average European today, our planet will not be able to cope with a global economy based on the current high consumption by 2050. The third dominant driver of change in global resources is that of urbanization. Global economic production is concentrated in cities. 80% of GDP is now produced in cities, with 60% produced in 600 of the most productive cities where 1/5 of the world's population now lives. If you look at global resource consumption, it is also concentrated in cities. By the year 2005, approximately 75% of global energy and material flows were consumed in cities, which covered just 2% of the land. Normally, as GDP per capita increases, the resource use per capita of a city increases as well. At the same time, cities concentrate large number of people in small places, and they also concentrate the knowledge, financial, social and institutional resources required for sustainability-oriented innovations. This captures the dilemma of cities for sustainability. They drive the global unsustainable use of resources, while at the same time they also bear the greatest potential for sustainability-oriented innovation. Now, take a few minutes and reflect, or maybe discuss also with a colleague, how these drivers of global resources use impact your industry or even your company. What are the trends in population, income and urbanization in the countries or markets where your company operates? And have you done in-house research on this? And are managers in your internal planning, strategy, research and development departments familiar with these trends? Do they have the relevant data? So take a few minutes to reflect on these questions and maybe press the pause button, and then we can continue with the rest of the session. A key risk, both for natural and human system, is that of disruption. Disruption in economies and markets can result from the following: increasing resource prices, which we mentioned already earlier on, increasing price volatility, as well as increasing resource scarcities. As we mentioned, resource prices are influenced by both market trends and governmental regulation, which can be subsidies and taxes on resource use. We will now dive a little deeper into the increase of resource prices. Consider the increase of prices globally for food, raw materials, energy, metals, and minerals since the 1990s. Some resource scarcities have direct impact on the development and diffusion of new technologies. Of special importance are metals and minerals. As metal concentration in accessible ores decline further, the metals become increasingly costly to extract and produce. ICT industries face the risk of growing costs in the supply of rare metals. The disruption of environmental system due to unsustainable resource use can be seen in the case of phenomena such as global climate change and biodiversity loss. The studies of the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity, also known as TEEB, and associated research of recent years have, for example, estimated the economic losses associated with degradation and unsustainable use of our natural resources. It suggested that a business as usual scenario may leave us with a loss of up to $4.5 trillion or 7% of GDP per year by 2050. Increasing resource prices bring inflationary effects. The related trends lead to increase in material costs for business from all sectors. This has been confirmed, for example, by surveys of the Eurobarometer among European firms. As we mentioned before, and if you look at the chart and look at the relative proportion that materials make up in the cost structure of German manufacturing, it is about 45%. Let's now have a look at increasing price volatility. Increasing price volatility will follow as speculation and a scramble to acquire resources impact on market. During the 20th century, commodity price volatility was higher than any other decade in the past. It, among others, reflected strong linkages between energy, water, and food production. Following the biofuel debate in the late 2000s, the FAO reported that the volatility of food prices increased 22.4% between 2000 and 2012, compared to 7.7% between 1990 and 1999. Correlation across commodity groups has become a key driver of volatility. In addition, commodity prices, volatility, and this interconnectivity has security implications for societies worldwide. This has been evident since the 2000s, with some countries experiencing food riots and other civil unrest in the form of the Arab Spring. On slide 18, we will now discuss increasing resource scarcities and the implications thereof. The implications are especially on land, freshwater, fish, and critical metals. The expected rise in demand for food, fiber, and fuel will increase pressure on land. By 2050, over 800 million hectares of natural land may be converted to cropland. Along with expanding cropland use comes land degradation, which today affects an estimated 23% of global soils. Considering rising global demand for water, available supplies may satisfy only 60% of world demand in 20 years' time. While dams contained 4 times more water in 2008 than in 1960, freshwater scarcity and water stress could affect more than 3 billion people by 2030. The FAO has also found that 35% of fish stocks globally were overexploited or depleted, and around half fully exploited by the mid of 2000. So how can business tackle these major challenges? Again, please take a few minutes to reflect in how far high prices, price volatility, and resource scarcity impact your business today. Do they present risks or opportunities? Have you recently taken note of these trends? Considering the global and regional context in which your business operates, are the possibilities of these disruptions taken on board in your internal risk management systems? Take your time to answer these questions and press the pause button. Let's move on to slide 20, which raises the questions: can markets save the resource challenges that we just raised? Will technological innovations and the entrepreneurial spirits of the market save us from global resource scarcity? In its decoupling report of the International Resource Panel, they caution that there are some key factors that are different today, implying we cannot put our faith in the market alone. These factors are, on one side, the scale and rate of change often outpaces the supply side response. The second one is that historically, growth in developed countries has used resources from other countries. Third, ore grades are declining, with related impacts on other resources. Another point is that there are linkages between energy production, water, resources, and food, which cannot be neglected. In addition, there are tipping points, as well as sudden or irreversible declines. And last but not least, many of the essential resources are not adequately priced today by the market. So what's your view on this? Do you think markets can save us? Do you agree that we cannot put our faith only in market forces and related technological innovations to help us effectively address the current global resource challenges? Where lies the appropriate balance between market innovation and regulatory intervention? Or what kind of smart regulations would best enable and support technological innovation and adoption of more efficient and cleaner technologies in the market? Should an appropriate price tag be put on these resources, or on ecosystem services, or on the 100 externalities that exist? We are faced with growing complexity, which challenges the ability of either markets or regulatory interventions to resolve the resource problematic on its own. On the opportunity side, national economies and individual enterprise have the possibility of reaching competitive advantage through a proactive response, as well as potential for improvement in resource productivity still remain to be accomplished. For example, the McKinsey Global Institute has estimated that resource productivity has the potential to earn $2.9 trillion each year by 2030 from resource savings. This estimate rises to $3.7 trillion per year if carbon is priced and subsidies and taxation align with policy goals. So there is hope, and what I'd like to do now is to show you the resource revolution cycle, which really highlights what we have tackled in this session. First of all, economic growth drives resource scarcity and price volatility and increases environment and/or social pressures. Following scarcity and volatility comes technological innovation. Innovation creates new technologies to enable either step change, more efficient use of those resources, or substitution. After the technological innovation come new business models and also new management tools developed to deploy these new technologies at scale, driving a step change in resource productivity across the economy. The overall economy begins to evolve, hence there will be an industrial transition as new industry replace less productive incumbents, enabling accelerating growth and wealth creation. The economic shift across industries also disrupts employment patterns, but accelerating productivity eventually supports higher wages and expanding middle class, which leads us to the sixth step of the resource revolution cycle, where resource prices stabilize, reflecting the new, higher productivity economic structure. So with this, we come to a close of the first session of the Resource Revolution Trainer.